The phone screen cracked when it hit the rocks, but the last photo still glowed through the spiderweb of shattered glass. Kai Brennan and Luca Voss stood in front of a wooden cabin that shouldn't exist, their arms wrapped around each other, mountains stretching endlessly behind them. The timestamp read 6:47 a.m. on October 15th, 2023. 43 minutes later, both men would vanish without a trace in the Italian Dolomites, leaving behind only questions that no one can answer and a photograph of a building that local authorities swear was never there. The couple had traveled 4,200 miles from Portland, Oregon to Italy for what they called their guerrilla wedding. Kai, a 31-year-old architectural photographer, and Luca, a 29-year-old wilderness guide, planned to elope somewhere dramatic and cheap, then sell the photos to pay for the trip. They'd been together for 6 years, engaged for 8 months, and broke enough that this adventure wedding was their only option. The plan was simple: hike to a secret sunrise spot, exchange vows, capture the perfect shot, and start their married life with a story worth telling. But the story that emerged would become something else entirely, something that challenges everything we think we know about the mountains, about missing persons cases, and about the thin line between adventure and catastrophe. The Italian Alpine Rescue Service has conducted over 200 searches in the Dolomites this year alone. They've found lost hikers, recovered bodies, and solved mysteries that seemed impossible. This case is different. This case breaks all their rules. The whole thing started with a Reddit post that Kai found 3 weeks before their departure. A user named AlpineGhost47 claimed to have discovered an abandoned refuge cabin at 2,800 meters elevation, accessible only by following an unmarked trail that branched off the popular Alta Via 1 route. The post included precise GPS coordinates, a hand-drawn map, and a single photograph. A weathered wooden structure perched on a narrow ridge, mountains rolling away in every direction like frozen waves. The sunrise from this spot, according to Alpine Ghost 47, was literally life-changing. The Reddit thread exploded with responses. Dozens of hikers claimed they'd been searching for this exact cabin for years, following rumors and half-remembered stories passed down from Italian climbers. Some said it was a World War I military outpost. Others insisted it was a shepherd's hut from the 1800s. A few claimed it was completely abandoned, while others swore they'd seen smoke from its chimney. But everyone agreed on one thing: if you could find it, the sunrise view was worth risking everything. Kai screenshot the entire thread, downloaded the GPX file that Alpine Ghost 47 had uploaded, and started planning their route. Luca tried to talk him out of it. As a professional guide, he knew the difference between adventure and stupidity. The Dolomites in October were unpredictable. Weather could change in minutes. Trails that looked clear on maps could be buried under early snow or blocked by rockfall. Going off trail without proper equipment, without telling anyone their exact route, without backup plans, was exactly how people disappeared in the mountains. But Kai had already booked their flights. He'd already imagined the perfect wedding. Photo. The two of them silhouetted against an alpine sunrise, exchanging vows in front of a cabin that existed outside the normal world. He'd calculated the exact camera settings, the precise timing, the way the light would catch the peaks behind them. This wasn't just their wedding. It was going to be the photograph that launched his career. They landed in Venice on October 12th, rented a small car, and drove north toward Cortina d'Ampezzo. Their plan was to spend one night in town, hike out early on the 14th, camp somewhere near the cabin, wake up for sunrise on the 15th, and be back in civilization by evening. Simple, clean, romantic. They checked into the Hotel Luna, told the desk clerk they'd be back in 2 days, and spent their last evening together walking through the town, holding hands, talking about their future. At 5:30 a.m. on October 14th, they shouldered their packs and began hiking. Kai carried his professional camera gear, 3 lenses, a tripod, and backup batteries. Luca carried their tent, sleeping bags, stove, and enough food for 3 days. Together, their packs weighed 67 pounds. They were both experienced hikers, both in excellent shape, both confident they could handle whatever the mountains threw at them. The first part of their route followed the well-marked Alta Via 1 trail, a popular long-distance path that winds through some of the most spectacular scenery in the Dolomites. They made good time, covering 12 kilometers in 4 hours, stopping frequently so Kai could take photos. Other hikers passed them, going both directions. Everyone was friendly. Everyone was prepared. Everyone was following the same marked trail toward the same predictable destinations. At 1:47 p.m., according to the timestamp on Kai's photos, they reached the point where Alpine Ghost 47's GPX file diverged from the official trail. The turnoff was barely visible, a faint path that angled up a steep slope covered in loose scree and stunted pine trees. Luca took one last photo of the main trail behind them, a safety shot, in case they needed to find their way back. Then they followed the GPS track into unmarked territory. The path climbed relentlessly for the next 3 hours. Kai's photos show increasingly wild terrain, knife-edge ridges, near vertical rock faces, patches of snow that hadn't melted since the previous winter. The GPS track led them through terrain that seemed impossible for human passage, around cliff faces where one wrong step would mean a 300-meter fall, across boulder fields where every footstep sent rocks cascading into the void below. But the track was accurate. Every twist and turn matched the downloaded route perfectly. Someone had walked this exact path before, had mapped every handhold and footstep, had created a digital breadcrumb trail through some of the most dangerous terrain in the Italian Alps. Whoever Alpine Ghost 47 was, he knew these mountains better than the people who'd been born here. At 6:15 p.m., as the sun was setting behind the western peaks, they reached what appeared to be their destination. Kai's final photo from that evening shows a flat area just large enough for their tent, surrounded by towering rock walls on three sides. The location matched the GPS coordinates exactly, but there was no cabin visible anywhere, just empty stone, and sky in the growing darkness of mountain night. They made camp, cooked dinner, and settled in to wait for morning. Luca later told investigators that he'd felt uneasy about the location from the moment they arrived. Something about the silence felt wrong. In 6 years of guiding in wilderness areas, he'd never experienced such complete absence of sound. No wind, no animals, no distant voices from other campers, just the weight of stone and sky pressing down on them from every direction. But Kai was excited. His photos from that evening show him grinning as he set up his camera equipment, tested his settings, calculated the exact angle where the sunrise would emerge from behind the eastern peaks. This was going to be the shot that changed everything. This was going to be their perfect beginning. They woke at 5:30 a.m. on October 15th to clear skies and perfect visibility. Kai's camera captured the gradual lightening of the eastern horizon, the first golden rays touching the highest peaks, the slow transformation of gray stone into living color. He took 47 photos in the first 20 minutes, each one more stunning than the last. This was exactly what he'd imagined, exactly what he'd traveled 4,200 miles to capture. At 6:23 a.m., something changed. Kai's photos suddenly shift focus from the sunrise to something else entirely. A structure that hadn't been visible in the darkness, hadn't appeared in any of his sunset photos from the evening before, now stood clearly outlined against the morning sky, less than 200 meters away. The cabin looked exactly like the photograph from the Reddit post, but older, much older. The wood was weathered to the color of bone, the roof sagged in the middle, and the small windows were dark as empty eye sockets. Above the door, carved deep into the wooden lintel, was a simple cross. No smoke rose from the chimney. No footprints marked the ground around it. But there it was, impossible and undeniable, perched on a narrow ridge that Kai would have sworn was empty the night before. The final photographs on Kai's camera tell the rest of the story. At 6:31 a.m., he and Luca are standing in front of the cabin, arms around each other, both smiling. The mountains stretch endlessly behind them, peak after peak, fading into blue distance. It's the perfect wedding photo, the exact shot Kai had imagined. At 6:44 a.m., he's photographing details of the cabin itself, the hand-hewn logs, the iron hinges on the door, the way morning light filters through cracks in the weathered walls. The last photo was taken at 6:47 a.m. It shows Luca reaching for the door handle. His face turned back toward the camera with an expression that investigators would later describe as curious rather than afraid. The door appears to be slightly ajar, revealing nothing but darkness beyond. After this image, Kai's camera captured nothing but empty sky and stone. No more photos, no more evidence, no more trace of either man. When Kai and Luca failed to check out of their hotel on October 16th, the desk clerk initially assumed they'd extended their trip without notice. American tourists did this frequently, especially couples who fell in love with the mountains and decided to stay, longer than planned. But when they missed their return flight to Portland on October 17th, and when Kai's sister couldn't reach either of them by phone, she contacted the Italian authorities. The search began on October 18th with a helicopter. Survey of the Alta Via 1 trail and all its official side routes. Rescue teams found no sign of the missing couple, but this wasn't unusual. The Dolomites cover 1,500 square kilometers of some of the most rugged terrain in Europe. Two people could easily disappear among the countless ridges, valleys, and cliff faces that make up this landscape. On October 19th, ground teams began following every possible route the couple might have taken. They interviewed other hikers who'd been in the area, checked every hut and refuge, examined every trail register. Several people remembered seeing Kai and Luca on the morning of October 14th, all describing them as well-prepared, confident, and heading north on the main trail. But after 1:30 p.m. that day, it was as if they'd simply evaporated. The breakthrough came on October 21st, when a rescue dog located Kai's phone wedged between two rocks at the bottom of a scree slope 800 meters below the couple's last known position. The device was badly damaged, but still functional enough for technicians to extract its contents. Among dozens of landscape photos and selfies, investigators found the images that would transform a simple missing persons case into something that challenged everything they thought they knew about these mountains. The photographs were clear, detailed, and impossible to explain. The cabin appeared in perfect focus, solid and real as the mountains around it. But when rescue teams used GPS coordinates from the phone's metadata to locate the exact spot where these photos were taken, they found nothing. Empty stone. Clear. Sky. No trace that any structure had ever existed there. Mountain Rescue Coordinator Alessandro Toriani has spent 32 years conducting searches in the Dolomites. He's recovered bodies from glacial crevasses, found hikers who'd survived weeks with broken bones, solved disappearances that seemed impossible. But he'd never encountered anything like this case. The photographs showed a level of detail that ruled out any possibility of digital manipulation. The GPS coordinates were precise, the timestamps were consistent. But the location where Kai and Luca had obviously spent their final morning showed no evidence that any building had ever been constructed there. Local historians dove into archives, dating back to the 1800s, searching for any record of structures built at that elevation in that specific location. They found documentation for dozens of mountain huts, military outposts, shepherds' shelters, and emergency refuges scattered throughout the Dolomites. But nothing matched the coordinates from Kai's phone. According to every map, every survey, and every aerial photograph taken over the past century, that ridge had always been empty. The investigation expanded to include geological surveys, ground-penetrating radar, and metal detection equipment, sensitive enough to locate buried nails or hardware. The team spent weeks examining every square, meter of the area, looking for any evidence that a structure had existed there recently or in the distant past. They found nothing. The bedrock showed no signs of excavation. The soil contained no construction materials. Even the vegetation patterns suggested that the ridge had been undisturbed for decades. But the mysteries multiplied rather than resolved. When investigators traced the Reddit account Alpine Ghost 47, they discovered it had been created specifically to post about the cabin and had never been active before or since. The GPX file had been uploaded from an IP address that traced to a cybercafe in Bolzano, but security cameras from that date had been routinely deleted months earlier. The user had paid cash and provided no identification. More disturbing was what happened when investigators tried to follow the route that Kai and Luca had taken. Multiple rescue teams, using the exact same GPS coordinates, found themselves unable to complete the path. Sections that appeared passable in Kai's photos were blocked by rockfall that seemed recent but showed signs of weathering that suggested it had been there for years. Routes that looked treacherous in the images turned out to be completely impossible, with cliff faces too steep for human passage and gaps too wide to cross without technical climbing equipment. It was as if the mountains themselves had changed. Between the time Kai and Luca passed through and when rescue teams arrived 4 days later, experienced guides who'd spent their entire lives in these peaks found themselves disoriented, unable to match the terrain they were seeing with the landscape, captured in the photographs. The search continued for 3 more weeks, expanding to cover over 100 square kilometers of wilderness. Helicopters equipped with thermal imaging flew grid patterns over every possible route. Ground teams explored caves, examined every cliff face, investigated reports from other hikers who claimed to have seen figures moving on distant ridges. The effort involved over 200 volunteers, cost more than 400,000 euros, and covered terrain that hadn't been systematically explored since the original geological surveys of the 1960s. They found nothing. No equipment, no clothing, no trace of human passage. It was as if Kai Brennan and Luca Voss had simply stepped out of the world at 6:47 a.m. on October 15, 2023, leaving behind only a collection of photographs that documented their presence, in a place that apparently didn't exist. The case officially remains open, but active searching ended in November when winter weather made the high country inaccessible. The Italian Alpine Rescue Service continues to investigate any reports of sightings or discoveries, but privately, most officials believe the couple fell from an unmarked cliff, and their bodies lie somewhere in terrain too dangerous for recovery teams to access. But the photographs remain. Clear, detailed, impossible to dismiss as camera malfunctions or digital artifacts. 2 men standing in front of a wooden cabin that cast real shadows, had visible texture, showed the kind of weathering and decay that takes decades to develop. A structure that existed long enough for them to approach it, examine it, pose in front of it, and begin to enter it, before vanishing as completely as if it had never been there at all. Mountain Rescue Coordinator Toriani keeps copies of the photos in his office, studying them during quiet moments, trying to find some detail that might explain what happened to Kai and Luca. After 32 years in these mountains, he thought he understood how people disappeared and why searches failed. This case changed that certainty. The mountains keep their secrets, he says now. Sometimes they keep them forever. But usually there are clues. Usually there are answers if you know where to look and how long to search. This time there are only questions and photographs of a place that doesn't exist, documenting the final moments of two people who loved each other enough to travel to the ends of the earth for the perfect wedding photo. They got their perfect shot. The sunrise behind them is magnificent, their smiles genuine, the mountains stretching away in every direction like a promise of infinite adventure. It's exactly the photograph Kai imagined when he first saw that Reddit post, exactly the beginning. He wanted for their married life together. Now it's the only proof they were ever there at all.